Hi everyone, welcome back to Box of Delights. Today I'm going to be doing a solo playthrough of Nature. I've got the deluxe big box here, which has got all the currently available expansions. Remember, this is a design that I did the solo rules for, so you shouldn't see any mistakes, but if I do get anything wrong, you can give me a good old ticking off. We're currently working on the climate expansion, so if you're interested in this game and you enjoy what you see from a solo, I've just finished the design on the solo expansion for climate, which is fantastic. It introduces all sorts of new challenges for you, hot and cold climates to play in nature. But what I thought I'd do today actually is show you a couple of the modules that you might not have seen yet. We're going to be playing with Arctic tundra and natural disasters. Yes, I'm going to try and make things as harsh as I can for myself. Our aim is to play 4 rounds. Our objective is to score points. Points are fed population on each of our species, plus a bonus for the number of species we can keep alive after those 4 rounds. Rani's going to be doing the same. We're going to be playing by all the same rules as a regular game. Nothing different playing solo, but we do have special rules for Rani and how to run our simulated opponent in Nature Solo. Now, as we set up, there's a couple of things I want to point out. On your solo cards, there's an icon. This icon tells you which set these cards come from. So this one's got this comet icon that comes from natural disasters. Okay. The wolf here comes from Arctic tundra. And the base set has this kind of seedling plant. Now, if you want to, you can mix all the solo cards together, but just know that some of these effects won't do anything. So, for example, if you're playing with Arctic tundra AI species, or Rani species, solo cards we call them, if you're playing with Arctic tundra cards and you don't have the Arctic tundra module, this says when played add the fat tissue or migratory grazing traits to Pygo, but those traits won't exist in your game, so you'll just have to ignore that. Okay, they don't get them, which is fine, but you've got species that won't be as effective in a non-tundra environment. These species, these AI species, are adapted to play better in their environments for Rani, okay, your opponent. And so these are your tundra ones. For natural disasters, these species, again, they're adapted to play better with natural disasters module in play, and they have different feeding rules. Okay, so Peresos here, when hunted, kills 2 population of the hunter. Melissa can be really dangerous in round 4. She adds a population after foraging from the watering hole. So you've got to find ways to, in fact, the only way to really combat this successfully is using your hunter to hunt this species to extinction in natural disasters. But again, you can play these when you're not using natural disasters, but you may find that they'll play very differently than when natural disasters is in play. All right, but find ways. This is what this game's all about. Particularly in solo and for Rani species, there'll be emergent behaviours, and you'll find combinations that we didn't find when we were playtesting in how you put your game together, particularly because this is a modular system, more modules come along, and I'm really interested to find out if you find a combination that you really enjoy. So we're playing with 3 modules, so we use base, natural disasters, tundra, and we mix all these together. Like I say, form whatever mix you want, but these are the Rani species that are specially adapted to be playing in their environment. And obviously we've got some Arctic tundra species and base species that aren't adapted to playing with natural disasters. So there's going to be some level of, does Rani play well or not well? And that's fine. That's very human, that not everybody knows how to play in every environment. First thing we do is choose a difficulty. We've got mouse is kind of easy and will be your little training wheels learning how to play. Rabbit, fox, tiger, and then snow leopard is the hardest. I think we'll play rabbit today because we're learning. We're in a tough environment. Let's play rabbit. Okay. Now this affects Rani in a couple of ways. First off, everyone starts with a size 1 species. Rani starts with 2. Each of those species not only has a size, it has a population, one population. So we all have a basic size one population species. So these are two for Rani and one for me. The difference is for Rani, her second species, playing rabbit difficulty, starts with 2 population, and that goes up. 3 for fox, 4 for tiger, snow leopard 5. Species are really basic. That's all they start with. Size 1, 1 population. They're just this nondescript animal species. But for Rani, we take one of these solo AI cards. Okay? We just draw 1 for each. We reveal the leftmost one first. So keep these left to right. This card will determine Rani's logic. And what we do is we look at this card and you can see it's got a left side and a right side. The left and right sides reflect Rani's mood effectively. The left side she'll use when she thinks she's in a fertile environment, and the right side a more frigid environment. Also, each side, left and right, has 2 columns. The first column is labelled rounds 1 to 3. The second is labelled round 4. We're going to be using this column in round 4, this column in rounds 1 to 3. Okay. Now she starts by thinking everything's kind of fertile, so we'll cover those up with her size dial and keep these icons. These are the icons we're using. Remember, we're in the first round of the game. These are the icons she's going to use. Okay. So Scamp is her first species. Her second species is called Mostos. Okay, and this one says, when played, add the migratory grazing trait and increase size for Mostos. So Mostos is going to start as size 2. And we're going to add the migratory grazing. Now I happen to know that migratory grazing comes from the Arctic Tundra module. So all we do is we look through this module, discarding cards until we find migratory grazing, and we add this to Mostos. Okay, to add a trait, we just place it like this. Now every species can have a maximum of 3 traits. Traits are our way of evolving our species. We can add population to a species, we can add size, we can add traits. There's a special trait called Hunter. Hunter, if we add the Hunter trait, the Hunter's in its sitting here in its separate deck. These cards, so Tundra traits and base game traits, we'll be drawing these cards and they'll be going into our hand and we can play them to our species to evolve them. Hunter is a trait that's freely available. Anytime we can take one of these Hunter traits, it takes up one of the 3 trait slots that a species can have, and if we do that we flip it and it becomes a hunter. So it's no longer a forager, it's a hunter. Okay. Yeah. Everyone starts as a forager. Now wonderfully, these are the base game hunter traits. There's also a set of promo special custom art hunter cards as well, which we're happy to use. Alright, so there's Rani's 2 species. She's got a Scamp and a Mostos. Meanwhile, we've got a non-2 special size 1, population 1 creature. Now we've got to decide too who's going to be first player. It can be us or it can be them. In the solo game, you decide. Just play alternately, do it randomly, however you want to decide who is first player. I'm going to have Rani go first. The other thing we do in a game of nature is we decide how much food is available in the watering hole. Normally you'll do this by flipping a card face up from the nature deck. And I'll do this actually. And here we go. We ignore everything but this icon in the bottom right. It says 2 and there's a leaf icon, 2 food. Okay, 2 plant food in the watering hole. And you would multiply with this by the number of players in the game. So if in a solo game that's us and Rani, that's 2 players. In a 3-player game it's 3 players, right? That kind of stuff. So in a solo game, 2 times 2 would be 4 food. Now in a game with Tundra in play, we don't multiply by the number of players. It's just a straight up 2. Okay, so if this is a 2, there's 2 food. If it's a 3, there's 3 food, and so on. Okay, we slip this under here, and this tells us that there's 2 food in the watering hole. Now, strictly speaking, you add food and then take your new species. It doesn't matter a great deal. Okay, Tundra. Next thing we do after adding food to the watering hole is we roll this die, and this tells us how much cold there were going to be. In the intro, I talked about climate and how we're working on a climate expansion. In climate, there'll be heat as well as cold, so the climate can swing from temperate down to hot and scorching, as well as kind of cool and cold and freezing, okay, like an ice age. But in Tundra, we roll this die. It's going to be cold. How cold is it going to be? This die will tell us. Okay. Right, very cold. Right, this is a terrible start for us. Now, if you're ever uncertain about what's happening when, use your reference cards, all right? So let's look at it again. So preparation, we add food to the watering hole. We gain our new species. The next step is we draw our 5 cards. Now, Rani's first, so she would draw cards, though it doesn't actually matter. Again, the order you do things here playing solo. But this is where difficulty level comes in a little bit different. Normally, you would draw 5 cards. I'm going to draw 5 cards. But for Rani on mouse, it's 5, rabbit is 6, fox is 7, tiger 8, and snow leopard 9. Now that changes again when you start adding modules. Now we've added 2 modules, but only one of those modules brought a trait deck. That was the Arctic Tundra. So how many modules brought a trait deck? 1. And it tells us actually in the solo rules for Arctic Tundra, depending on which difficulty you're playing, modules with a trait deck 1, she'll draw 3 cards from that deck and 3 cards from this deck. So instead of drawing all 6 from here, she's going to draw 3 from this deck. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, we'll give those a shuffle up and kind of do this a little bit blindly if you can. All right, so there's a little bit of shuffling involved. But rabbit's nice and easy, just remember 3 from each deck. All right, so that's Rani having drawn her hand. There's her hand, we'll set that aside. For us, we get to choose how many cards do we want to draw from each deck. Now it's going to be very cold. I know that cold protection is given by some of these Tundra traits. For example, hibernating here gives 3 cold protection. Okay. So I think I'm going to draw 1, 2, 3, 4. I draw 5 cards. Let's draw 4 from here and 1 from here and see what we get. At the end of the round, and this is something new that you see in Tundra, at the end of the feeding phase, the cold will kill population from each species equal to the cold level unless it has cold protection. And the amount of cold protection we get is equal to the size of our species 1 plus any cold protection from traits, which is why I've taken lots of these. So if I increase my size up to say 4, which is the maximum, with this I would have protection from 7 cold. There's 8, I would lose 1 population. Alright, so yeah, let's just throw our discards off to the side here. This is going to be tricky. 8 is difficult. Now one thing you can do obviously is to protect your species, just increase its population, because that's as good as protecting you from 1 cold, right? You just lose 1 population. So think about that. Let's see what cards we drew. Well, I've got a fair amount. I've got migratory grazing, I've got white fur, and I'm fast, so I can protect myself from hunters. Now as it goes, looking up at Rani here, and she's drawn 2 species which are not inclined to go hunting. If I see any red traits like this, then yeah, and there's none on Mostos. If I see any red traits, they're liable to go hunting. So what Scamp is saying is they're going to stay as forager if one of Rani's species lose population, maybe they couldn't feed or they got hunted, then she's going to switch moods, and that would turn her into a species that is more liable to go hunting. Okay, so yeah, this is how Rani's moods work. So I'm mindful of that. I'm also mindful that Rani's going to feed first. So it might be wise for me to go hunting, but I don't really have much in the way of traits that allow me to hunt. Migratory grazing is good. It lets me forage from the supply rather than the water hole, but it does make me vulnerable to migratory predators, but I don't think there are going to be any. So yeah, I think migratory grazing is going to be good. Okay, we're moving into the adapting phase here. Incidentally, natural disasters, we're not going to see these until the end of each turn, apart from the final turn. So in a solo game, we're going to see 3 of these cards, one at the ends of rounds 1, 2, and 3. Some major event is going to happen in the environment that's going to affect us in some way. All right, how do we use our cards? So we already got the idea that we can add cards as traits. That's one thing we can do. But we can also increase size and increase population. To increase size, you just toss away a card and increase size. To increase population, you do the same. You just toss away a card and increase population. There's a fourth thing you can do with your cards, and that's save it for the feeding phase. Okay, so right now we're adapting. We always, in the solo game, we always adapt first. It doesn't matter who's holding the first player token. We've got a clue as to what they'll do, and this reflects what happens in the multiplayer game. In the multiplayer game, our opponent would have adapted now. Now we can, and they've put some cards here, and we'll get a read on what they would have done. For the solo game, your read comes from looking at these icons. Okay, so I've already talked about how I don't think she's going to go hunter. All right. Now, oftentimes, if you add a hunter trait, this is clearly visible to everyone. Okay, because it's double-sided. It's not a hidden trait. You've grabbed a card from the hunter deck and you've turned your thing hunter. There are some hidden hunter traits in some of these modules. You won't see them in the base game, but a hidden hunter is basically when a trait gets added that turns the species into a hunter without it being revealed. Okay, so there's kind of this surprise hunter, and that's what Rani's going to do. She's not going to tell us when she's going hunter. She's going to keep it as a hidden hunter. Okay, so they might go hunter, but I know they won't unless I see some of these red icons, which we're not seeing on their current mood. All right. There's always ways that they can surprise us though. So, but we're getting a read. We think she's not going to go hunter. And then I can see that she's likely to play some traits. Scamp is likely to play traits with this kind of seedling icon and this cog icon. But then the pangolin, which I know are defensive traits, they're going to use for population. The icon's in a circle. And hunter traits, the ones with the cat icon, are in this kind of D-shaped outline. They're going to use those for increasing size. And then the ones with this vulture icon are going to use for increasing population. But these two without any border, the seedling and the cog, they're going to use as added as traits. Right? So Rani's given a hint as to how she's going to use her cards. What do those icons mean? Well, if we look, we can see that migratory grazing has the vulture icon. I know she's not going to go migratory grazing with Scamp, because if she sees a vulture, then she's going to use it for population. Again, they're going to use that the vulture for population, and the pangolin, which are more defensive traits for size. They've got a leaf up here as their trait icon. So white fur's got the leaf trait. This is one of the promos actually. And I quite like this as well. It can't be hunted, but I mean, again, they're not going to use hunters, but this is a nice defensive trait. The cog is going to be used, it says can only be hunted by a species with as many fast traits. So Scamp is likely to use cogs as a trait rather than anything else. So I'm getting a read, okay? And that's equivalent to them adapting first. Now let's see, I adapt first. So I'm going to go migratory grazing. I think I'm going to add migratory grazing as a second trait. And then white fur. So that's it. I've put my traits down. In fact, I might just put white fur twice. Yeah, that's nicer than migratory grazing. I mean, I only need one of these. So this gives me 2, 4, 6 protection plus 1. That's 7. So I'm going to lose 1 population. But I could discard a card for size, which I'm going to do. Now, normally you could discard 1 card for 1 population. Now, unfortunately, in Arctic Tundra, there's a couple of special rules. The first special rule is to add population, you need to discard 2 cards. So I've got to decide, actually, do I want to increase population or do I want to increase size? I'll take that card back. Think about this for a second. The other rule is I could save this card for 2 food, but in Arctic Tundra, whenever you discard a card for food, it only ever adds 1 food, irrespective of this number. Right, so Arctic Tundra really is making life difficult. So at the moment I've got 7 protection. If I discard 2 cards for a population, what's that going to do? Cold is going to kill 1, so I end up with a 1, 1. Okay, that's one option. The next option is that I increase its size. I'll spend a card for size instead. Now I've got 2, 4, 6, 8 protection from the cold, and I've got 1 fed population. I think this is slightly better. And I can save a card. I can't increase population, and I could increase its size again. I've got to do this, I think. We'll keep it at 1 population. 2, 4, 6, 8. Protect it from the cold. Hope they don't hunt. I've got 1 population that's being fed. And if I need to, I can throw 1 food in the watering hole. Oh, I can grab food from the supply. Yeah, this 8 cold is not very helpful. All right, I'm going to come away with a measly 1 point by the looks of it. Okay, let's see what Rani does. So Rani's got a hand of 6 cards that we shuffled up. All right. So all we do is we draw these cards one at a time, and we look at the icon in the bottom left. Here, it's this leaf icon. Okay. Then we go to her species. She's got 2 species in play, remember. And we go look down these lists of icons, these columns of icons, and we see which one has the leaf icon at the highest position. Scamp doesn't have it at all. Mostas has it at the topmost position. Okay. Now remember, cards can be used in one of 4 ways. They can be added as a trait, they can be discarded for size, they can be discarded for population, or they can save them for the feeding phase and use them for their food. Though remember, in Tundra, this is always 1, irrespective of the number. So what does Mostas do? What does Rani do with this? If there's this D shape, she'll use the card for size, a circle for population. No shape at all, she'll use it as a trait. And if there's no room, because she's already got 3 traits, they'll save it for feeding instead, right, for its food. Right, that's how it works, nice and simple. So here we see the leaf at the topmost, no shape around it, it's going to be added as a trait. Now, the order of these traits is important, so add them kind of left to right, which the rules will talk about oldest or leftmost and oldest being synonymous. Okay, so this is the oldest species, this is the oldest trait. Next card is hibernating. There's a rule I've forgotten. Let me fix that. This is a solo card from the base game. Mostos is from Arctic Tundra, and there's a rule in Tundra that says non-Arctic Tundra solo cards, like Scamp, add hibernating. So actually, Scamp would have had hibernating anyway when it entered play. All right, so this should be here anyway. Okay, what's next? Next, we see the pangolin icon. Scamp has it 3rd down, Mostos has it 2nd down. Okay, they're going to use it as size. So they're going to throw it away and increase their size. Right? Now be aware of some of the rules. So in the adapting phase, for Tundra Solo, it says, when Rani is increasing population, there's some special rules. Okay, but that's it. That's all we need to worry about. If she uses a card for population, we'll refer back to this rule. Okay, so Mostos has gone up to size 3. They're not going to have much protection from the cold. So this is going to be tricky for Rani. We'll see what happens. Next is the leaf. So that's going to be added as a trait on Mostos. Then we've got the big cat. Okay, so Mostos doesn't have this icon. Scamp has it in the 4th position, and it has this D shape around it. They're going to use it for size. Discard, increase their size to 2. Okay, last card is the leaf. It would go to Mostos, but Mostos already, and it goes as a trait, but Mostos already has 3 traits, so it's not going there. Scamp doesn't have it, so she's going to save this card for food. Put it face down in their hand. That's it. Rani's finished adapting. Everyone's adapted. As I suspected, they didn't go hunter, but I think they're going to suffer from the cold. Let's see what happens. Rani's going to have a hard time, I think. We shall see. So feeding phase. So Tundra Solo, there's some special feeding rules. Rani will use migratory grazing only if the watering hole is empty. So we've got Mostos up here with migratory grazing, which has a special ability that lets her feed from the supply. This is saying, well, they'll only do that if the watering hole is empty. Interesting. Hibernating says, may treat 2 populations if they're not hungry. So normally you have to feed hungry population when you can and starve hungry population when you can't. But with hibernating, you don't have to feed them and you don't have to starve them. Starving means the population are killed. If they can't feed, they die. If your species loses its last population, it goes extinct. You lose that species and we won't be getting any points for it. So hibernating can be really cool in a cold climate if you can survive the cold, which I don't think they will. The scamp is a little too small. Okay, feeding then. So we're moving to the feeding phase now, and Rani's first player. They've got logic that drives what they choose to do. They'll always try and feed a forager when they can, and they'll feed the forager that will take the most food. When you feed from the watering hole, you take food, plant food equal to your size. So the scamp would take 2, but they've only got 1 population, so they can't take 2. You can only take as much food as you've got hungry population. So the scamp would take 1 food. Okay? And if they were feeding scamp, they would not use the hibernating trait. That's what Tundra rules, Solar rules told us. So they would treat this hungry population, they would take 1 food. What about Mostos? Mostos is size 3. They could take up to 3 food. They've got 2 hungry populations, so they would take 2 food. Okay, so typically they would feed Mostos first. They would take the 2 food and feed Mostos. However, Rani will always feed hungry species without migratory grazing first. So, a special rule to override. This species has migratory grazing. They would normally feed this species first and take 2 food, but they're going to feed this species and take 1 food for their hungry scamp first. All right, lovely, that's it. That's their turn feeding. So in the feeding phase, we'll take turns feeding. They'll get to feed. Now I get to feed. Okay. I've got my migratory little white rabbit. There's 1 food in the watering hole. I can take up to 2. My size is 2. I'll take it. I could forage from the supply if I wanted to, but I'm not. I'm going to take it here from the watering hole, put my 1 food here. I've fed my species. I'm happy. Okay. Now we have triggered Tusked now. Tusked on Mostos says, when the watering hole becomes empty, it eats 1 meat. So we take 1 meat and we feed 1 of their population. Mostos is going to feed now. They're the only species left with hungry population. They've got 1 hungry. They can forage from the supply and they're going to take 1 plant from the supply. They could take up to 3, but they've only got 1 hungry population. There we go, done. So everybody's fed. So although it's a low food environment, although conditions are harsh, our traits have allowed us to all feed. But now's the hard part. At the end of the feeding phase, this is from Tundra, at the end of the feeding phase, the cold will kill population from each species equal to the cold level unless it's protected from the cold. So our species has got 2, 4, 6 plus 2, 8 protection. We're good. It's not looking quite so good for Rani. This species has 3, 4, 5 protection from the cold. They would lose 3 population. They've only got 1. So this species is killed. That food is lost. What about Mostos? Mostos has got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 protection from the cold. This isn't protection from the cold. This is protection from hunters. It's 2 kind of plated, 2 shields, if you like. Okay, so 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 protection from the cold. Cold is 8. They would lose 1 population. Doesn't matter which one you take, so they're going to lose 1 population, they're going to lose 1 food. All right, that's it. That's the end of the feeding phase. The cold has killed the scamp. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, this scamp goes, right? This is lost. The size dial and the population, though, from scamp and the cards, they all get saved. This card goes to their hand. The size and the population we're going to place aside for round 2. These are going to come back for Rani. So Rani's not lost everything. They've gained a card, they've gained 2 size, and they've actually gained a population for round 2. And Rani has just 1 species left. This is now her oldest species, Mostos. But that's okay, that's fine. Because when we move to scoring, what you'll see, although she's lost a species, right, she's got some carryover for next turn. And that's a mechanism in nature, whether you're playing solo or multiplayer, that always happens, right? That's just a regular rule. You know, the same will apply to us. If we lose a species, we get to keep its cards, its size, its population for our new species in the next round. But now we move into scoring. And any food that remains on your population will go to your scoring bag. All right, so for Rani, that's 1. For us, that's 1. Doesn't matter if it's meat or plant. It's just a nice thematic indicator of what food was eaten. It may become important. There might be traits that trigger off that. You'll have to discover that for yourselves. All right. Now, Arctic Tundra adds a new rule. At the end of each round, we get a bonus for each species that's still alive. And at the end, this is normally an end of game bonus. So we would get 2 points for every species left standing. In Arctic Tundra, it happens at the end of every round. Yes, it's a harsh environment, but we're going to score more points for keeping species alive. That's really significant in this module. So Rani has 1, I have 1. We get 2 food each. It doesn't matter if we add plant or meat. So we're both on 3. We're both on 3. We're doing okay. Rani has a slight advantage because she's got extra population cards and size for next time. But we will be first player next time. What about natural disasters then? Just before we finish up and move this first player token over, we're going to grab a natural disaster card. All right, so we turn over the top card and this card comes into effect. And we have, oh wow, rebirth. At the start of the next feeding phase, add 10 plant food to the watering hole. Wow, okay, wow, this is quite a change. And it has this comet icon that's with a 1 in it. What that means is we place this with 1 comet token on it. Okay, all right, this is in effect. We grab a comet token, and that goes here. And that basically says this is going to stick around for 1 round. All right, let's move to round 2. Oh my goodness, that's really going to change things up. We are now in round 2. And there's going to be an abundance of food. For some reason, suddenly, there's a flurry of food in this environment. Natural disasters are not always a disaster, are they? Okay. Preparation, add food to the watering hole. So we'd normally add 2. Remember, in Tundra, it's 2 food, not 2 per player. Rebirth says we add an extra 10 food. We have these 10 tokens. If we want to use them, we can. After adding food, we roll the die. So how much cold is there going to be? Let's roll it and see. 2. Okay, so it's significantly warmed up, and there's an abundance, suddenly a rebirth of food. This round's going to be very different. And in fact, when we come to, I mean, I'm not going to show you it now, but if you look at the climate expansion, I talked about it in the intro, we got cold and heat. The amount of food available is directly linked. There'll be a climate track to the climate. If it's temperate, if it's warm, there'll be more food than if it's cold and freezing. Right, so not so much cold now. So my white fur down on my little rabbit here is not so useful anymore. Other traits might be more useful. And that's okay, because your species can adapt. We can remove traits and just throw them away. If we remember, there's a limit of 3, but if we want to add different traits, maybe we want to add some greedy traits to make them eat more plant food, we can throw away traits to make room. We can adapt a species freely. Now, just before we start round 2, there's one last thing we need to do for Rani. She's going to change her mood. Mostos lost a population. This gets placed here. This is going to get saved as well. Lost population will always carry over to round 2. But not just that. Every time Rani loses a population, she changes her mood. Okay, so now she's going to be using the right-hand side with the blue tree here. And she throws away a trait. So just how we talked about species adapting, she's going to throw away a random trait. You can do this randomly. You can roll a die, or just, what I like to do is just shuffle them up blindly and then pick one. So she's thrown away one of her migratory grazing traits. Okay, that gets discarded. Now we get our new species. So we get a size 1, population 1, species for round 2. Rani would get the same, a size 1, 1 population with a card, but it also gets these bonuses from size and population last time. So size 2 bonus, so this will be a size 3. And she lost 2 population, so they come over, and she's got a size 3 population species for next time. And what is it? It's Volpes. Volpes says, when played, add the migratory, predator and underground traits to Volpes. Okay, I happen to know these are tundra traits. So migratory grazing is not, that's discarded. Underground den, yes. Migratory predators, we'll just keep drawing until we find one. There we go, okay. So that's added. Now this is a hidden hunter trait. This says when it's played, they turn from forager to predator. So this dial flips over. Remember, new species start on their left-hand side. Wow, now that's an interesting scenario here. When we've got a plant-rich environment, they didn't need to turn forager. But in the solo rules, sometimes Rani would just turn hunter just to give you... Remember, she's not really trying to play like another player. This is just a set of scenarios. It's an environment that you're trying to survive in and score as many points as you can in. In this environment, there happens to be a hunter, a migratory predator, like a wolf, in the environment, and we've got to deal with that. We've got to deal with that threat. Okay, so yes, sometimes, I mean, as a human player, you might say, well, I would never have turned hunter at this point with all that food there. Fair, right? But Rani's not a human player. Rani is a set of circumstances. That's the way to think of it. Okay, a set of circumstances interacting with you in some way. When do you, I mean, that's another interesting, when do you as a player decide to go hunter? Well, typically it's when you think you can't get food from anywhere else. Being a hunter in this game is quite niche, right? It's not at heart a conflict-rich game unless it needs to be. And if there's no food to get anywhere else then going hunter is a good thing to do. Or if you feel that by hunting you're going to get an advantage over an opponent. So there is, circumstances and environmental conditions for hunters to thrive is not that common in the game. And that's just how it is in the world. There we are. Now, note that this is a hidden hunter trait. We don't need to go and grab another hunter trait from this deck, right? This card on its own is enough to make this species turn from forager to hunter. Okay, so we don't need to add a third trait, taking up another slot to do this. This acts like this card on its own. Okay, I'm going to wrap up the video here, and join me if you want to see how this plays out. Join me in part 2. Meanwhile, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.